Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. The latest developments out of the Sarah Lawrence College Culp federal trial.
We're getting into the nitty-gritty. The old saying, follow the money. Well, the government is following that money.
And more than 100 arrests made as part of the Panama City beach takeover.
The behavior of these pathetic cowards that came to our beach and committed these crimes, their actions will not be tolerated.
Plus, a past injustice paves the way for the future of civil rights.
I just signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal hate crime for the first time in American history.
But first,
he pulled out a gun and shot me once, twice, directly in the chest.
the Olympian attempted murder trial where victim Lauren Kanarek takes the stand. Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. The trial of former Olympian Michael Barisone heats up as the woman who Barisone shot twice in the chest takes the stand as a prosecution's star witness. Back in 2019, prosecutors say Barisone shot Lauren Kanarek in the chest twice after back and forth arguments about Kanarek's living arrangement. At the time, Kanarek and her boyfriend, Robert Goodwin, were living on Barisone's property. At the same time, Barisone was training her in dressage horseback riding. In the days leading up to the shooting, a string of 911 calls were made by both parties. Barisone saying he tried to evict Kanarek and Kanarek saying she was being harassed. Defense attorneys say Barisone feared for his life at the time of the shooting and suffered from mental health issues, even sleeping in his stable leading up to the shooting. Barisone was arrested after he shot Kanarek in the chest and fired another shot at Goodwin. On Wednesday, she told jurors what led up to the shooting and how she reacted in the moments after.
I then was thinking, all this stuff had been happening for the past couple of days. Michael had been calling the police on us for reasons that we didn't even know why. And not that it was out of character for him to act one way one day and then, be nice the next day. But I kind of wanted to know, so I walked over to him and said, how do you plan to make this better? How do you, you have a bill or something. I was saying something about the bill that he had to settle with Rob, but I didn't get that far because...
Why not?
The minute I started talking pretty much, within the minute I started talking, he pulled out a gun and shot me once, twice, directly in the chest.
Do you remember how he was holding the gun? Was it close to his body or pointed out and held away from his body?
It was kind of like he pulled it out, pointed it, boom, boom, just like that.
Can you tell the jury what you remember seeing or hearing when he fired the gun?
I remember seeing my chest.
Why'd you look at your chest?
It was almost unreal to me that I just gotten shot. So I looked at my chest quickly to see, are there really bullet holes there? Like, this can't be real. I also then saw Michael raise his arm up and shoot at Robert, who was on the porch still, just directly raised his arm, shot at Robert, and then Robert disappeared. At that point, I saw Michael run around me and go running up the stairs of the porch.
Ahead of Kanarek's testimony, jurors heard from Ruth Cox, the woman whose gun Barisone used to shoot Kanarek. She told jurors Kanarek knowingly did not follow the rules of the stable.
She and he would come at odd hours during the night and do exactly as you said. Turn all the lights on in the stable, turn on the music, which for the horses, they should have quiet and peace at night and not be disturbed because they are very busy during the day. And that was the routine that was asked to be done at the stables, is after 8 o'clock that there be nobody up there in the stables.
All right, joining us today is former detective and SWAT member Lisa Lockwood and Terry Austin. Lisa, Kanarek took the stand and was even cross-examined. So how did she hold up?
She did great with the prosecution because they were able to get out her story without any interruption, where she was able to explain exactly what happened. Defense attorney, however, had been admonished multiple times regarding his course of questioning. And a lot of time was spent on audio recordings where she was attempting to audio tape Barisone and find out what he was saying. So I feel right now, as far as where this is headed, prosecution has a great case. She's a victim, she's a witness, and she can tell her story exactly as it happened. And I think she held up very well.
Yeah, and she's survived two shots, sorry. So that's amazing for the prosecution to be able to get out there. Now, Terry, self-defense is largely about reasonableness, but how does that work when you factor in Barisone's mental health?
You know what? I actually think that the defense is doing pretty well so far. I think, first of all, the jury is looking at this and thinking the judge is being very difficult as far as the defense attorney is concerned. He's doing the same thing the prosecution's trying to do, and the judge is stifling him. I think as far as Lauren Kanarek is concerned, she was taunting him, and it was very clear on those questions that she posted a lot on social media. And then at the time, we know that Barisone probably knew about the social media, knew she had a gun, knew she was threatening him. And once she physically approached him, maybe he was thinking she was going to attack him. Maybe she had the gun and he was in self-defense shooting her, and he shot her and she survived. Look, no excuse for shooting anybody, but we just saw that in Florida, someone with popcorn won a case and was acquitted. So who knows what this jury is going to do.
The interesting part, though, Terry, is a lot of the information you're talking about can only come from one person. So maybe Barisone takes a stand, and maybe that's his only saving grace in this case. Of course, we'll be following this case for gavel-to-gavel coverage and give you the updates as they come out. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, spring break takes a dark turn when dozens of people are arrested in Panama City Beach, Florida. But first, more than half a century after his tragic murder, Emmett Till is forever immortalized when an anti-lynching act is signed into law. Welcome back. Historic legislation was signed by President Biden, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal hate crime in America for the first time ever. Congress attempted to pass similar legislation over 200 times before this one finally moved forward this year. The bill's namesake, Emmett Till, was a 14-year-old black teenager from Chicago who was abducted, tortured, and shot in 1955 after a white woman claimed he whistled at her at a store in Mississippi while visiting his family. The woman's husband at the time and his brother were tried for his murder but acquitted by an all-white jury. The two later admitted to his killing. Till's mother used his funeral as an example to shed light on racism in the U.S. and the barbarism of lynching. President Biden spoke to reporters shortly after signing the bill on Tuesday.
Between 1877 and 1950, more than 4,400 black people were murdered by lynching, most in the South, but some in the North as well. That's a lot of folks, man, and a lot of silence for a long time. Lynching was pure terror to enforce the lie that not everyone belongs in America, not everyone is created equal. Terror to systematically undermine hard-fought civil rights. Terror, not just in the dark of the night, but in broad daylight. Innocent men, women, and children hung by nooses from trees, bodies burned and drowned and castrated. Their crimes? Trying to vote, trying to go to school, trying to own a business or preach the gospel. False accusations of murder, arson, and robbery. Simply being black.
Back to break down this landmark legislation is former Detective Lisa Lockwood and Terry Austin. Terry, I've seen this bill referred to as largely symbolic, but with some serious teeth. What are your thoughts on it?
Listen, Brian, there's no question. This is a significant piece of legislation. It actually recognized the history of racial violence in this country, and that's important. It sends a message that any of these people who are engaging in this type of crime will have significant punishment of at least 30 years. So basically what it's saying is that whoever conspires to commit a hate crime offense that results in death or serious bodily injury and they haven't received due process, that individual, they could be in prison for 30 years. What I really like about this, Brian, is that it was a bipartisan vote. We know only 3 Republicans did not vote for it in the House, and it was unanimous consent in the Senate. Good backing, great bill, glad it happened.
Absolutely. Now, Lisa, how do you think this law would have affected cases like the death of George Floyd or even Ahmaud Arbery?
Definitely, I think it would affect the Ahmaud Arbery case because we know what happened there. We had three individuals who were pursuing a man who they thought was stealing and ended up executing this man, and they all had weapons just because he didn't stop. No due process whatsoever. They took the law into their own hands. One of the things I also researched is hate crimes. In 2020 alone, 11,000 hate crimes were committed. 61% were based on race alone. Of those 61%, how many would have benefited from this new law with anti-lynching on top of it as an enhancement? So I think it's necessary, and the national attention surrounding this is important as a deterrence. It needs to stop.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully this law never needs to be used. Hopefully lynching is not something we ever see in this country again, but it is there to be enforced and hopefully stops others from doing it. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, the latest developments in the Sarah Lawrence Collins sex cult federal trial. Plus, more than 100 arrests put a damper on a Panama City beach spring break vacation. Why officials call the suspects, quote, cowards who hid behind guns. Welcome back. A spring break vacation gone wrong as more than 100 arrests are made and 75 weapons are recovered as part of the so-called PCB Takeover. It started as a social media phrase indicating the takeover of Panama City Beach, Florida during the spring break. Participants of this social media event would gather at spring break house parties, concerts, block parties, or beach events, many of which carrying weapons. In all, 161 people were arrested in connection to the takeover. The majority of the arrests stemmed from illegal firearm charges. In all, 75 weapons were recovered by law enforcement, all of which were possessed illegally. In a press conference, the Bay County Sheriff said law enforcement used technology like license plate readers and cameras to get ahead of the suspects.
This is an event that we've been planning for and gathering intelligence on for 2 or 3 weeks. And I think that's been a success, and it allowed us to target the bad guys and know where they were, be there before they got there, be there after they got there, and target them and put them in jail.
We can't control who comes to town, and I said this yesterday, but we can control what happens to you when you commit a crime in this town. In front of you, you see a representation of the danger facing our community and our law enforcement officers. These guns were taken over a period of 2 days. It could arm a small army. Semi-automatic weapons, long rifles. These are weapons brought to a resort destination. These were weapons brought to a beach by cowards that hide behind these guns, by cowards that cried when they were approached by true heroes wearing a badge. These individuals will soon find out what justice looks like in Bay County. The individuals that carried these guns will find out what happens when you commit a crime in Bay County. It will not be tolerated.
Former detective and SWAT member Lisa Lockwood and co-host Terry Austin are back to break down the bust of the PCB takeover. Terry, do you think this model can and will be replicated in other spring break or large party venues, and can it help to limit crime generally?
Well, you know, it's a really strange situation. I do think if local communities like, Panama City Beach, if they've experienced this type of criminal behavior where people come into the community, they have guns, they're stealing, they're robbing, they're threatening people, I think if you know that's going to happen, you should defend your city. You should use social media. You should plan to be ready for any such attack or that type of behavior. Frankly, I haven't seen that type of behavior before, but I do think that their response, the authorities' response to this, was right on point, if in fact they've had that issue before.
Yeah. Now, Lisa, we're just hearing a snippet of how big this bust is. Can you give us a bigger picture or some background as to how large an operation like this must have been to capture so many guns?
Well, we know it was a joint agency operation. There were 4 agencies involved everywhere from Florida Highway Patrol to Bay City Sheriff's Office and Panama City Beach and PD as well. They seized high-powered weapons, high-capacity weapons. They used the intel, like he said, license plate readers. They also, I guarantee you, aside from 600 citizen phone calls, they had tip-offs. They had informants. They have people who are already in custody. But the biggest tip-off were the offenders. They talked about this online. They planned this big takeover. It was there. They knew who was coming. So it was just a matter of time to get them all together in one place, one house, get the promoters, and have this incredible seizure that they did.
Absolutely. Hopefully it keeps spring break in Panama City Beach just that much safer for everyone. Thank you both. When we come back, the accused leader of the Sarah Lawrence College cult stands trial in federal court. Law&Crime Network's Adam Classfeld brings us the latest testimony from inside the courtroom. Welcome back to Law&Crime Daily. Testimony continued Wednesday in New York federal court in the case of accused Sarah Lawrence sex cult leader Lawrence Ray. The focus shifting from his alleged victims to the investigation into Ray's finances. Ray faces several federal charges, including racketeering, sex trafficking, and money laundering, among others, in relation to starting an alleged cult with his daughter's college friends and some of their siblings, dating back to 2010. Prosecutors allege Ray used fear and manipulation to get his alleged victims to feel that they owed him and would use different means to get them to pay him back. Court exhibits share insight on testimony of victims saying they asked friends and family to loan them money. One of Ray's victims, Claudia Jury, testified he forced her into prostitution and ended up giving him millions of dollars. On Tuesday, an FBI forensic accountant took the stand, telling jurors of this complicated web of ways money trickled in from jurors' clients and other outlets. Law&Crime's Adam Classfeld is following this case from inside the courtroom. He brings us an update on the latest testimony.
The government's case appears to be winding down, and we're getting into the nitty-gritty. The old saying, follow the money. Well, the government is following that money, including the $2.5 million that Claudia Drury says that she made for Larry Ray from sex work. Her finances appear in a series of charts that were scrutinized by an FBI forensic accountant. It doesn't go into all of the $2.5 million number, but it does provide a portrait of it, and it shows a common theme over the course of 15 pages of the document that were analyzed for the jury. It shows that much of this money went to Larry Ray's GoDaddy account, where he had this domain name business that prosecutors say was his method of laundering the money. It's pretty eye-popping when you look at these flow charts. They had more than 1,000 transactions totaling nearly $1 million. And we still have to hear the defense case. As I said, the government appears to be winding its case down. We may, though we don't know, hear from Mr. Ray himself. After that, I suppose we'll hear closing arguments, and then the case will go to a jury that will consider 17 separate counts charged against him.
Lisa, Adam said it best, follow the money. But is that just a saying, or is it true both in real life and this trial?
Oh, without a doubt, this is real life. Having a forensic audit on his GoDaddy accounts showing over $1 million in revenue. That's where he laundered the money. Also finding out with the prostitution ring that he was running, the young lady said it was in excess of 2.5. So where else, aside from GoDaddy, was he able to launder this money? It was a unique way, something completely different, but criminals are always looking for different ways to go ahead and layer their money, find banks to transfer money, to get cash into the system where they're not audited by taxes. So thank God for the laws regarding racketeering. He extorted money, and he also did money laundering on top of the other 16 charges that he has regarding the abuse and the sex cult. The list goes on. So This is something that is a story like I've never seen before.
Yeah, this is definitely one I've never seen either. Tara, we've talked about this before. What do you think of the order of the witnesses for the prosecution? Do you think ending on the finances leaves a strong enough punch, or does it even matter with all of the testimony we've heard so far?
I do think the strongest strategy for any prosecution is to begin strong and to put in the less interesting information in the middle and then to end strong. So there are a number of victims here who could have started, and we did see that. We know for a fact that Felicia Rosario and her brother Santos Rosario were two of the victims here. And of course, Claudia Drury was on the stand for quite some time. But what I would have done is to put the finance people, and Lisa's right, it's very important to follow that money. I would have put them in the middle and then ended probably with Claudia Drury, because her testimony was extremely compelling and she talked about the money.
Yeah, I agree. That would have been a strong end to have Claudia Drury there. Well, thank you both, as well as you. Thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.